This is Sovereign Debt, a podcast on greening the global economy and debt sustainability. I'm your host, Jill Doshi. So today's guest is very special. As you may know, Rwanda is a country on the move. Its population is young and dynamic, governance is good, and Rwandans are willing to innovate and set the pace for the rest of the world. Today, we're lucky to have a guest who represents these qualities. Thierry Watrin is in charge of the green economy and climate change at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning of Rwanda. Thierry, thank you so much for agreeing to come talk to us.
Thank you for inviting me, Jill. I'm super happy to be part of the podcast and excited as well.
So some of our audience, Thierry, might not be totally aware of Rwanda and just exactly, as I said in the intro, just the dynamism that's going on in the country and the leadership you are showing for the continent and the world. One noticeable reform that you put in, actually remarkably, I think it was 14 years ago, was the elimination of plastic bags or single-use plastics, like really quickly, ahead of a lot of people. And you've been kind of thinking about the green economy kind of, I think, sooner than most. Can you maybe just give us a little brief intro to some of the biggest measures and just some of the thinking of the government and how you became one of these pace setters?
Yes, absolutely, Jill. But just right before beginning, I would invite our audience to come and visit Rwanda, just to experience and see from their own eyes the country, the youth. We have as well high-end tourism with gorillas, and we have the Akagera Park, which is the national safari park, which is awesome. And so I would invite them for their vacation in 2023 to just come and visit Rwanda.
Yeah, I would totally second that. It's a beautiful country.
Yeah, it is. And I feel so blessed to be part of that and to be a Rwandan, especially being a young man as well, and being able to be part of this energy and this move and moving forward with the green economy. So just to provide you with some context, our audience may not be aware about what Rwanda has been doing, but for people who work in the green economy, they usually know that Rwanda is ahead. So just to provide you with some feedback, Rwanda has experienced one of the fastest economic growth in Africa for the last decades, while keeping a strong commitment to achieve a sustainable economy. In 2008, you were talking about that, Rwanda banned the plastic bags. If you come in Rwanda, you would actually hear in the plane that you have to remove the plastic bags from your luggages before entering the country, which is quite exceptional. And at the same time, what's interesting is that Rwanda developed a national economic development plan for poverty reduction strategy, which is basically implementing a green economy approach in line with the economic growth. So the focus at the time was mainly green sectors, like green urbanizations, innovation in both public and private industry, and promote affordable green housing. So that was a challenge as well, to make housing affordable and green, like respectuous of the decarbonized standard and in a sustainable way. Right after that, in 2011, Rwanda adopted the Green Growth and Climate Resilience Strategy to deliver a sustainable and climate resilient economy, to promote the environmental and social well-being, while at the same time preserving the environment and the biodiversity. And if you go in Rwanda, but a lot of sub-Saharan countries, you would see this willingness and sometimes even this culture about preserving the environment and the biodiversity in the same time as growing. So it's something that you would really enjoy as a human being and as a person. This program, the GGCRS, was in line with Vision 2050. It was establishing the country's strategic development from 2020 to 2050. So that's what's interesting, is that to see the vision that you have in Rwanda that's really long term. So people think about 2050 right now, whereas in some other developed countries, the vision would be a bit more short term. Which is interesting as well as a developing country, because the challenges that comes with being a developed country would be to develop in a sustainable way, right? Because just being focused, for example, on fossil fuel products might be challenging right after 2050, when you see the number of commitment for carbon neutrality.
This is kind of the crux of the matter, right? Because for developed countries, the challenge when we talk about mitigation, transition, adaptation, etc., the real challenge for developed countries is the mitigation. It's how do we stop emitting as much as we have been historically. And it's interesting when you're starting to talk to kind of more developing countries, the challenge is really not so much around the mitigation, because historically Rwanda has not been a big emitter and hasn't really been contributing to the greenhouse gas. But the challenge is therefore actually how do you develop an economy and grow the economy without deepening a dependence on fossil fuels?
Yeah, absolutely, Jill. And when it comes to Rwanda, what's interesting is the political willingness. Because as you said, Rwanda emits almost nothing. If I'm not wrong, it's less than 0.003%
Exactly.
of the world's GHG emission. So you would think, why would Rwanda lead on this topic? It's about political willingness and best practices, right? If you can even be, you engage to be carbon neutral, but if you can be even carbon negative, that's even better for the world, right? And
right.
So following these best practices while you developed, because we're still a developing country, is kind of an excellency in the economical transformation and development. And about fossil fuel, you were talking about that, and yet it requires an energy transition, because
right.
the developed countries developed in the industrial period, and at the time the economy were carbonized, right? Using fuel, using coal, using peat. But right now, as you developed, you need to make an energy transition. So for Rwanda Green Growth Strategy, what has been doing Rwanda is to focus on harnessing renewable energies, like developing power plants and infrastructures based on renewable energies. And since you've been in Rwanda, you know that Rwanda is the country of the thousand hills. We do have a lot of hills, and you have hydro that come with that. So using and focusing on hydro as renewable energy to develop in a green way was the main focus in the last decade. So there was a program called the Energy Sustainable Development Strategy, which aimed at curbing the dependencies on non-renewable resources to fight global warming, but to promote adaptation and mitigation. We're talking about that. But it provides both, having a green energy. And as well, what we've seen, and we'll discuss about that because it will be the topic of 2023, inflation. So by that, you increase the resilience against potential imported inflation linked to fossil energies import.
No, exactly. I mean, I think many countries now, given the geopolitical situation and energy security, many countries have focused on their dependence on fossil fuels and the costs and basically looking at how they're going to diversify away from that dependence. So obviously, when you're just developing and not yet have that full dependence, it's important to build that in.
I can add that Rwanda has a share of 53% of renewable energy, and the largest contributors are hydro and solar power, but mainly hydro. And on top of that, the development of the energy transition, Rwanda has set up environmental friendly policies. It's part of the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, such as exemption of import, excise duties, and VAT on electric vehicles, batteries, and charging station equipment. So it's something that's really special and kind of rare, but Rwanda has done it and courageous at the same time.
Right.
With the aim of developing the national e-mobility.
That's just incredible. But all of this takes an incredible amount of investment. None of these technologies that you're referring to are cheap. First of all, I guess Rwanda is in a better place than some of the peers on the continent in the sense that your debt is sustainable and you have a very strong debt management policies as well. But how, when you're talking about all of this development and new technologies and transitioning and things, how has those strategies fit into kind of your financing strategies?
The thought first was, while developing the program, and I'll give you the example of energy, what are the benefits? So for example, in Rwanda, I was talking about the inflation, so limiting the inflation linked with fossil fuel imported energy. You have as well the grid stability. So while you use the renewable energy, you can increase, if you do it in a smart way, the grid stability. And at the same time, you can stabilize a decarbonized electricity with guaranteed low prices of electricity, which is something that we know will trigger investment and the development of the economy. So that was the thought before implementing it. And there's a quote that I like from Albert Einstein. When you have a complicated problem to resolve, if you have 1 hour to solve it, you should spend 55 minutes about asking the right questions. So yeah, that was part of the questions before doing the policies, just asking ourselves, okay, what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What are the 5 P's of Porters? What is the SWOT? Just like discussing and taking time about thinking how you develop your economy and what are the in and out of the development of a green economy. So once that was done, a few programs were developed. So we had, for example, the Integrated Household Living Conditions Survey that showed that the majority of the Rwandan households were using biomass fuels. And so we identified the development of green economy and the reduction of using biomass, which will be in line with our green economy targets. But we wanted to decrease it sharply and very fast by 2024. And it was part of what's called the National Strategy Transformation Program 1, which is due by 2024. So you have this institutionalization of green economy programs that helps you to have a programmized approach with all the targets set in national programs and saying to the ministries and to the public institutions, well, this is our programs that we need to follow it, that would trickle down actually to the different public administration. So that's a bit how we've made it.
So Rwanda's, I think, has been just generally internationally recognized as kind of like I said, a trendsetter in this space, and has also been one of the first countries to access certain funds to support these efforts. So in particular, just recently, Rwanda was one of the first recipients of the IMF Resilience and Sustainability Trust facility that was just set up. In fact, we have kind of earlier podcasts episodes about that trust. And it just became operational in October. And I think Rwanda is literally one of the very first countries to access it. Were you involved in that process? And can you tell us a little bit about kind of how that works? And from your perspective, just what is it providing and how is it addressing your needs?
Yes, so actually that's true. It was operational actually as of the board meeting that validated it in December, but it was announced in October 2022. So what's interesting is that Rwanda has become the first African country to access the fund under the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. So what does it mean? It's a game changer. It's a game changer. And the IMF program was a brand new one. I remember in COP26, the managing director, Madame Kristalina, used to talk about that. It was not set, but there was a sense on how can we help the countries that follow the best practices for the green economy to kind of reward them and help them to build resilience to external shocks and ensure sustainable growth, contributing to the country's long-term balance of payment stability. And what's interesting that when you think about that, GL, we moved from a stable world with a low inflation and low rates, at least for the last decade, to a new world for this decade, having a high inflation, having crisis, pandemics, war in Ukraine, and disrupted supply chains. So I think that the IMF had a sense about creating this new program to promote stability to the new challenges of the world. The agreement with Rwanda was the access to up to 319 million highly concessional USD, financing the efforts in building resilience to climate change.
And it's longer term money, correct? I mean, it's not typical IMF financing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long-term money, and it's actually done to finance long-term structural changes of economies. So it's absolutely not an orthodox funding, you would say, and usually it's not the primary mission of the IMF, and that's why it's interesting, because the resilience and sustainability facility reforms are supposed to help the countries like Rwanda to advance measures to integrate climate-related consideration in the design of macroeconomic policies and framework, as well as enhancing climate-related risk management for financial institutions, which you would call the systematic risk. And at the end, strengthen the disaster risk reduction management frameworks that countries like Barbados that were able to have it have been doing on an excellent and leading way.
No, precisely. And so ideally, this is a process by which you are building that resilience and also at the same time demonstrating good governance and good planning and meeting targets and the like, and all of which then feeds into strengthening a credit story and just helping the government longer term as well in its financing plans.
Absolutely, and the goal as well was to focus on Rwanda's well-advanced climate strategy and the use of the fund to further strengthen the institutions and be able to deliver and monitor as well the ambitious climate objective that the country had, and as well mobilize additional resources. Because
exactly.
Because Potomac Group has been working on Rwanda's lately, that our NDCs, our national demand contribution needs are around 11 billion USD on less than 10 years. It's huge.
Exactly. So these are these interesting programs that are coming along to help kind of lay those foundational kind of groundwork, so to speak, so that, building that credibility and building those stories and starting to kind of be able to mobilize other financing all in a sustainable way, this is the challenge. But also, let me pivot also to another global initiative that Rwanda has been kind of, again, a first mover and a pace setter for the rest. is the Global Shield. And I think some of our audience might not have ever even heard of this. So first of all, could you tell us a little bit about what is the Global Shield, which is an initiative from the German government or initiated by the German government? And can you tell us a little bit about what it is and what's that providing as well?
Yeah, basically the Global Shield is coming from a joint G7 and V Vulnerable 20 ambitions, which is the group of the 20 countries that are the most vulnerable to climate change. Was working about a program you could call or an initiative to fight climate risk at national level. It was based on a few challenges that would be, for example, the urgent need of vulnerable economies and people facing increasing climate risk that need to be addressed. The need to have better systems in place to provide immediate financing needs in the most efficient, effective, and fastest ways to the most vulnerable, and as well provide protection to financial protection, which is not systematic now, to the most vulnerable people. And so it came from a partnership between the G7 and the V20 finance ministers group to the most vulnerable countries, which Rwanda is part of, to support in closing the protection gap for the poor and vulnerable people against the climate-related losses and damage. So for now, it's still very new because it was announced during COP27, which was in November last year in Egypt. And we're still discussing and consulting internally and externally as well to engage before engaging and seeing how we can make it work. You were asking me the question before about why Rwanda was so efficient on its green economy and so in advance. It's as well that we take time about thinking about how do we organize in a structural way, like who's doing what and how. And the how will be which program, and the who will be which institutions will be the leading one. And the technical working group that we'll set up, which are really key.
We touched on the V20 and the COP27, but maybe we should have actually started with that question, because the COP27, I know you were there. I know you were at the table with your peers and your counterparts internationally, negotiating some of these agreements. Can you just personally tell us a little bit about your experience at COP27 and just, first of all, was it your first COP that you were in that position, and what was your feeling of the process, and did you leave with some hope or despair?
I spent 10 days in Egypt. So yeah, for sure, I can talk about that. And there are many questions in your question. And actually, it's a mixed feelings, I think, for everybody. What's complicated about the organization and the expectations about COP27 is that basically it was the African COP, as you said. So the developing countries were expecting a lot, and the developed countries as well. The difference is about how the expectations were defined. So what you have in COP27, and for our audience to really understand, is that you have the bilateral negotiations and meetings, which I was part of, and you have the pure negotiation, which is more a block-to-block discussion. So usually on the block-to-block discussion, people end up COP frustrated and not happy, accepted that for COP27 people were, due to the damage and loss agreement, which was not the case in COP26. And on a bilateral way, for Rwanda, it was an exceptional COP. But we were expecting that because we arrived ready. And for Rwanda, COP27 was COP26 plus one, because we were at COP26 and we prepared at the end of COP26 for the whole year for COP27.
Okay, so you had a very clear goal of what you wanted to achieve in COP27, and kind of more or less knew what you were going to be getting out of that process bilaterally.
Absolutely. And it's important for the audience to understand and to make the difference between the bilateral expectations and the block to block expectation. But as a matter of fact, yes, when you negotiate block to block, it's always more difficult to have results than when you negotiate countries to countries. So yeah, and we had many good results. Like for example, we signed a deal on promoting clean cooking with Italy. Rwanda and Italy, they signed a 2 million agreement to find projects to promote clean cook stoves. I was talking about that before. The replacing biomass and use more of clean cooking, which is a very low hanging fruit and a multiplier effect project. So we're able to sign a partnership with Italy. About the clean cooking technologies, we're able to sign with the UK Department for Environment a cooperation on the African Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooking and Cold Chain, which is basically developing cooling solutions. You know, like those big fridge containers for our farmers to be able to store them. It will be a center actually that has been established in Rwanda in 2020, which is dedicated to sustainable, smart cold chain cooling and post-harvest management, basically. And it will be a 4.8 hectares campus in Kigali, which will be actually done and hosted in the University of Rwanda, because we want as well to engage our youth. So it's a very exciting as well project for Rwanda. It's one of many partnerships that we're able to sign. We signed with Germany a partnership on climate via our Rwanda Green Fund. So yeah, we had had Ireme Invest, the launch of the Rwanda Green Investment Facility that was launched by our president, which was something incredible, because usually the presidents in COP remain in the red zones, and it's kind of rare that you have a president that come in the blue zone. But we had our president, His Excellency Paul Kagame, that came and launched the Ireme Invest. It was an incredible and a very emotional moment for a lot of people, because you had not only Rwanda coming, but the whole Africa coming for this event, which is the first of its kind ever in Africa. And it's a facility based for and done for and shaped for the private sector, the green private sector development, and to help them to play a greater role in climate action. It was just to give you an example, and I'll stop there. The investment facility was set up for 100 million, the first round of capitalization. And we actually received 104 million, because the partners were so excited and were believing in the project and the coherence and how it made sense. So that we received even more amount that's expected.
So is this meaning that a transition away from kind of project finance and more structures, like what Potomac Group has always been working on, or been working on a lot over the last few years, is the sustainability linked bonds, and something else that's a little bit freer use of proceeds, but still kind of linked to some sort of key performance indicators. So it's like sort of tagged to these frameworks and targets, but not necessarily kind of project by project. So you could raise larger amounts of money and have a little bit more freedom of how you use those proceeds. Is that something that's attractive?
It is. It is sexy, I would say. Why it is? Because it brings flexibility. And what we need currently is flexibility, not rigidity. The challenges are great. Keeping the 1.5 alive, and we know it's very and super challenging. And so bringing flexibility to countries that need bigger efforts and that have been weakened by COVID-19, by disruption in supply chain, by the inflation, the global inflation. It's key. It's key. You need to provide flexibility, otherwise it won't work. It will be too difficult.
What do you need as an issuer government to help make that happen?
You were talking about the sustainability linked bonds. I think it's something that's definitely will be needed, and not only for Rwanda, but I think for a developing country. Why? Because it provides, as I said, flexibility, but as well a programmatic approach. We need to work with programs. So the countries are doing the work of doing NDCs. You have the nationally determined contributions of many sub-Saharan African countries that are very complete and quite impressive, actually. I've read some and I was like, wow. Yeah. And so we need to use those kind of programs to derive financing instruments, right? And not come with financing instruments that are not based on the programs. So from there, you define KPIs, NDCs KPIs, sustainability-linked bonds, sustainability-linked KPIs, and build on that.
And that's exactly what we've been trying to work with a lot of different parties, from everything from the issuers to the banks to the multilaterals, et cetera, is to try to kind of push for those sorts of things to happen. Do you feel like you need, again, this is just kind of just maybe not just Rwanda specifically, but just the market. Do you think that the market then needs to provide credit enhancements to make that happen?
Yeah, but the question of the interest rate, for sure, it's central, and we'll need concessionality through green engagement. But that's the case. Actually, that's already the case. Because if you look at the Resilience and Sustainability Trust and the green bonds, usually the premium is awarded for the green actions. As well, we'll need some innovation and always a cohesion and coherence between the product, the financing product, and the country. So you'll have for sure the classical one like grants and classic bonds, but sovereign bonds. But you'll have as well wildlife, for example, conservation bonds, the rhino bonds, as the one you had in South Africa. You'll have the local biodiversity offsets that are starting to come. You have the credit carbons, the carbon offset credits that will come, and all those kind of instruments will start to pop up. And we'll need to make it in a smart and resilient way, and adapt it to the countries, and that will be the solutions to the challenges linked to climate change. That's my uptake. That's my vision on that.
As a last question, it's a tradition of ours to hand it over to our guests to give a little piece of advice to debt managers or other officials in your kind of similar position to your peers. Do you have any parting words of wisdom or advice? I mean, you've offered quite a lot throughout this entire conversation, but just in summary, is there any last word that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll try to be very succinct. I think with the challenges of COVID-19, of the disruption in the supply chain, of the global inflation, comes as well opportunities. So you'll have a financing gap for sure, which will be wide to close, and changes linked to that. But you'll have as well opportunities to engagement, to climate action and sustainability. And so with the ongoing projects that will be disbursed, that could be a sectorial approach with a multiplier effect approach that could be proposed. For example, using the project that fight climate change, that fight inflation at the same time. We're talking about mitigation and green energy that provide socioeconomic impact, that provide gender equality, and high qualitative jobs. For example, working in those hydropower plants that we have in Rwanda. So it's something that we need to think about. And while there will be challenge and stress on the debt, there will be opportunities as well. And I was talking about a new innovative debt instruments and like sustainability linked bonds. You have the carbon offset credits that will come for sure. So I think that it's a time where actually debt manager and debt management and people working in the ministries of finance should as well learn more about the green economy possibilities. And it's new for everybody. So everybody is learning and the products are new and the wildlife conservation bonds are like happened not last year, but the year before. So it's still very new and everybody is learning and there will be a lot of opportunities. So I think that with challenge come opportunities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Thierry. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm happy to share and provide some insight. I truly believe that the way to go, right? Communicate and work together.
No, absolutely. And I look forward to working together with you going forward to make all of this happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, leave us a review and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts.